Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is stuck in traffic, screaming at a stranger who can't even hear them. Their blood pressure is rising. Their hands are gripping the steering wheel like they're trying to choke it. And the person who cut them off, already home, eating dinner, completely unbothered. Think about that. One person is suffering, the other doesn't even know this war exists, and here's what nobody tells you. The person suffering chose to be there. Not consciously, not on purpose, but they chose it. Because anger is not something that happens to you, it's something you do to yourself. And I can prove it. There's a neuroscience principle called the 90-second chemical rule. When something triggers you, your brain releases a cocktail of stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. That cocktail floods your bloodstream and creates the physical sensation of anger. The tight chest, the hot face, the clenched jaw. But here's the part that changes everything. That entire chemical process completes in exactly 90 seconds. After that, every single moment of anger you experience is self-manufactured. You're not reacting anymore. You're producing. You're the director, the actor, and the audience of your own anger movie, and you keep hitting replay. But what if you could just walk out of that theater? What if you could reach a point where nothing anyone says or does can hijack your emotional state? That's not a fantasy. That's a skill. And by the end of this video, you'll have the exact blueprint to build it. And if this is your first time on the Dopamine Script, this is what we do here. We take the psychology behind how your brain actually works and turn it into tools you can use starting today. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Who controls your emotions right now? If your honest answer is, it depends on what happens to me, then you're living as a puppet. And the strings? They're not even real. We walk around believing that other people pull our emotional strings. My boss made me furious. My ex made me feel worthless. That comment ruined my day. But here's what's actually happening. Nobody is pulling your strings. You're pulling them yourself and blaming the audience. Imagine a puppet that could cut its own strings anytime it wanted, but never does, because it forgot it has scissors. That's most people. Those scissors are awareness. The moment you realize that no external event has automatic access to your inner state, you become free. Not free from difficult situations. Free from being controlled by them. A study from the University of Stanford showed that people who believed they had control over their emotional responses experienced 40% less anger in identical triggering situations compared to those who believed emotions just happened to them. Same situation, same trigger. Completely different experience. The only variable was belief. So here's your first shift. Stop saying they made me angry. Start saying, I chose anger in response to them. It sounds small. It changes everything. Because the moment you own the response, you own the power to change it. Ask yourself honestly, whose hand is on your strings right now? And are you ready to pick up the scissors? You've seen an iceberg, right? 10% above water, 90% hidden underneath. Your anger works the exact same way. What you see on the surface, the yelling, the sarcasm, the cold shoulder, that's just the visible tip. Underneath, there's something much bigger. Hurt, fear, shame, rejection, feeling unseen. Anger is never the real emotion. It's the bodyguard. It shows up because the real emotion feels too dangerous to express. Think about it. When your friend cancels plans last minute and you snap at them, are you really angry about the schedule change? Or do you feel unimportant? When your partner doesn't notice your effort and you start a fight, is it really about the dishes? Or is it about feeling invisible? Anger is loud because vulnerability is terrifying. It's easier to say, you're so inconsiderate, than to say, I feel like I don't matter to you. But here's the paradox. The emotion you're hiding is the only one that can actually fix the problem. Anger pushes people away. Vulnerability pulls them closer. Next time you feel that heat rising, don't ask, why am I angry? Ask, what am I really feeling right now? You'll be surprised. Under every angry outburst is a softer emotion begging to be heard. When you learn to speak from that place, conflicts don't just resolve, they actually deepen your relationships. Think about your last argument. What was the iceberg underneath your anger? Pilots don't take off the moment they start the engine. They taxi down a runway first. Your emotions work the same way. Between the trigger and your reaction, there's a runway. It's only about 2 seconds long, but those 2 seconds are the most valuable real estate in your entire emotional life. Most people don't even know this runway exists. Something happens and they're immediately airborne, reacting on autopilot, saying things they'll spend days apologizing for. But what if you could use that runway? What if, in those 2 seconds, you could make a different choice? Here's a technique that sounds almost too simple. When you feel triggered, say one sentence silently to yourself, "I have a choice right now." That's it. You don't need to meditate for an hour. You don't need to count to 10. You just need to remind your brain that autopilot is not the only option. Your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. Your face gets hot. Your jaw tightens, that's the engine starting. But before you take off, you're on the runway. I have a choice right now. Maybe you choose to address it privately after the meeting. Maybe you choose to document your contributions going forward. Maybe you choose to let it go because it's not worth your energy. The point is, you chose. You didn't react. You responded. And that difference, the difference between reacting and responding, is the entire gap between people who are controlled by their emotions and people who seem unshakable. Those unshakable people aren't emotionless. They've just learned to use their runway. Here's a question that sounds strange, but stay with me. Have you ever been angry at the rain? Probably not, because you understand that weather just happens. You don't take a thunderstorm personally. You don't think the clouds are targeting you. You just observe it, adjust, and move on. Now, what if you could treat your emotions the same way? Inside every person, there's a part that feels the emotions, and a part that can observe the feelings. Psychologists call this metacognition, thinking about your thinking. I call it becoming the weather watcher. Instead of saying, "I am angry," which fuses your identity with the emotion, try saying, "I notice that anger is present." It sounds like a tiny language change, but neurologically, it shifts activity from your amygdala, your emotional reactor, to your prefrontal cortex, your rational decision maker. You're literally changing which part of your brain is in charge. Your neighbor plays loud music at midnight, the old you becomes the anger. The weather watcher in you observes it. Frustration is showing up. My heart rate increased. My thoughts are going to a hostile place. From this observation point, you have clarity. You can knock on their door calmly instead of banging on it furiously. You can wear earplugs and deal with it tomorrow. You can choose based on wisdom, not rage. The weather watcher doesn't suppress emotions. That's unhealthy. It simply creates a space between you and the emotion, so you're experiencing it without being enslaved by it. The storm still happens, you just stop standing in the rain. If any of these ideas are clicking for you, do me a small favor. Hit the like button right now. Not for the algorithm. For the next person who's sitting in their car right now, angry at someone who doesn't even know they exist. Help this reach them. And if you're watching this far, you're clearly serious about leveling up. Keep watching. The next chapters get even more practical. Here's something that might be hard to hear. The things that bother you most about other people are almost always reflections of something unresolved in you. This is called the mirror principle, and it's one of the most powerful tools in emotional psychology. When someone's arrogance drives you crazy, ask yourself, where in my life am I afraid of not being good enough? When someone's laziness frustrates you beyond reason, ask, where am I pushing myself too hard and resenting that others don't? The intensity of your reaction is the clue. If something mildly annoys you, it's probably just annoying. But if something sends you into a spiral of rage, there's a mirror involved. Your colleague constantly brags about their accomplishments. You feel your blood boiling. But why? Because deep down, you feel like your own accomplishments aren't being recognized. They're not the problem. They're the mirror showing you an unmet need. When you start using the mirror principle, difficult people become incredibly valuable. They're showing you exactly where your emotional work needs to happen. They're not obstacles. They're diagnostic tools. And the beautiful irony? Once you heal the thing they're reflecting, their behavior stops bothering you entirely. The mirror goes dark because there's nothing left to reflect. Think about the person who irritates you most. What might they be mirroring back to you? Every building has a thermostat. When the temperature rises too high, it kicks in and cools things down automatically. You need one for your emotions. Most people live without an emotional thermostat. Their internal temperature is completely dependent on external conditions. Hot conversation, they overheat. Cold rejection, they freeze. They're thermometers, measuring and matching whatever environment they're in. But emotionally intelligent people are thermostats. They set their own internal temperature, regardless of what's happening around them. Here's how to install yours. Choose a baseline state you want to operate from. Maybe it's calm confidence. Maybe it's patient curiosity. Whatever it is, that becomes your default setting. When something pushes your temperature up, you notice it and consciously return to your baseline. Not by suppressing the emotion, by acknowledging it and choosing not to let it override your default. You're in a heated family discussion at dinner. Everyone is escalating. Voices are getting louder. Accusations are flying. The thermometer in you wants to match that energy. But the thermostat in you says, my baseline is calm. I can hear what's being said without matching the volume. I can respond without reacting. When you become the thermostat in a room, something interesting happens. Other people start adjusting to your temperature instead of you adjusting to theirs. Calmness is contagious, but only when it's genuine, not performed. Here's a rule that will save you from more regret than almost anything else. Never make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion. I call this the 24-hour rule. When you're triggered, give yourself 24 hours before you send that message, make that phone call, or have that confrontation. Not because the issue isn't important, but because the version of you that's angry right now is not your most intelligent self. Your IQ literally drops when you're emotionally flooded. Your prefrontal cortex goes partially offline. You lose access to empathy, nuance, and long-term thinking. You become a worse version of yourself. And that worse version wants to make decisions that the better version will have to clean up. Your business partner makes a decision without consulting you. You're furious. You draft a scathing message at 11 p.m. Every word feels justified. Every sentence feels necessary. But you don't send it. You save it. You sleep on it. The next morning, you read it again and realize that half of it was emotional venting, not productive communication. You rewrite it with clarity, with your actual concerns, minus the accusations. That rewrite gets you a productive conversation. The original draft would have started a war. 24 hours is the minimum effective dose for emotional intelligence. The draft is always worse than the rewrite. What decision in your past do you wish you had waited 24 hours to make? This might be the most counterintuitive technique in this entire video. When someone treats you badly, instead of getting angry, get curious about their pain. Because here's a truth that's hard to accept, but impossible to deny. Hurt people hurt people. That driver who cut you off aggressively, maybe they just got fired. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe their world is falling apart, and driving is the one place they feel any control. You'll never know their story, but you can choose to assume one that serves your peace instead of destroys it. This isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of anger. When someone insults you and you respond with anger, you've given them your power. When someone insults you and you respond with compassion, or even just silence, you've kept your power entirely. A customer screams at you over something trivial. The reactive response is to match their energy or shut down. The compassion shortcut is to think, this person is clearly in pain about something much bigger than this situation. That thought alone changes your physiology. Your heart rate slows, your perspective widens. You stop seeing an enemy and start seeing a struggling human. And here's the selfish benefit of compassion. It feels better than anger, every single time. Anger is exhausting. Compassion is energizing. One depletes you. The other refuels you. Next time someone is difficult, before you react, ask yourself, what pain might be driving this behavior? Everything we've talked about leads to this. The ultimate level of emotional mastery isn't about techniques, it's about identity. Right now, you might identify as someone who has a short temper, someone who gets easily frustrated, someone who can't help but react. And as long as that's your identity, no technique in the world will permanently change your behavior. Because humans always act consistently with who they believe they are. But here's where the real shift happens. You don't need to change your behavior, you need to change your story about who you are. Instead of I'm someone who gets angry easily, try I'm someone who stays calm under pressure. Instead of I can't help it, try I choose how I respond. This isn't positive thinking or affirmation nonsense. This is identity-level reprogramming. When your identity shifts, your behavior follows automatically. You don't have to force yourself to stay calm, because calm people don't have to force calmness. It's who they are. Every time you successfully use your runway, watch your emotions like weather, or apply the compassion shortcut, You're not just managing an emotion, you're casting a vote for your new identity. And when enough votes are cast, the election is over. You become that person. The person who doesn't get rattled. The person others look at and wonder, how do they stay so calm? The answer is simple. They decided to be that person, and then they practiced until the decision became permanent. Here's what I want you to take from this video. You were never a puppet. The strings were never real. You've always had the scissors. You just didn't know where they were. Now you do. Start with one technique this week. Just one. Use the 2-second runway. Or become the weather watcher. Or try the compassion shortcut. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to start being intentional. And I promise you, the first time you feel a trigger and choose your response instead of being hijacked by it, you'll feel something incredible. Freedom. That feeling is addictive in the best way possible, and it only grows from there. If this video gave you even one insight that shifted something inside you, share it with someone who needs it. Someone who's been at war with people who don't even know they're fighting. And if you want more videos that turn psychology into power, subscribe to the Dopamine Script.
Right now.
We're building a community of people who refuse to let the world control how they feel. I'll see you in the next one.